It's the How Games Make Money podcast. This week I'm talking with developer whose name is Owen but goes by Rootpew. He created Splitter Steel, which is a free-to-play game that got its start on Congregate and is now pretty big on Steam. We'll talk about all of that and more really soon. Before we get to that, though, I want to thank everybody for listening. If you want to email the podcast, you can get us at gamespluspodcast@venturebeat.com. If you could rate the show, that would help people find it. Also, tell a friend. That would help too. All right, I think we should get to the episode. Rootpew is very insightful about what it's like to make a game as a passion project, as something to do to get out of a funk, and then what happens when you put that out in the world and now it's popular, but it costs money to keep going, and then the time and investment it takes to really get that up and running to a point where it can sustain itself while you also still are working a day job. Let's get into that conversation right now. Thanks again for listening. Let's do this. Joining me now is Owen. Go ahead and say hi to everybody, Owen.
Hey, how are you, Jeff?
I'm real well. Do you want to give your name, title? Why don't you tell everybody
Sure thing. Sure thing. So my name is Owen. I'm a developer based in Dublin in Ireland, and I'm the developer behind the moniker of Rootpew with the game Splitter Steel running on Steam and on Congregate.
Awesome. So yeah, that's what I want to talk with you about. Splitter Steel kind of came on my radar over the past month or so. I'm always looking for stuff on Steam. It seems like it has quite a large audience as far as I could tell. I guess that's difficult for me to tell, but it seems popular. And I wanted to talk to you about that. Let's start from the beginning here. Where did Splitter Steel come from?
So I had left a job that I really didn't enjoy about a year ago. When I finished up in that job, it was kind of, I'm sure you've had it yourself. You have an awful job. You just don't want to do anything for a while. And pretty much you just want to sit on the couch. And that was about it. So to kind of bring myself out of that, I decided that I wanted to get back into games development. I'd worked as a games developer in Germany a couple of years ago. I'd always kind of dabbled with games development as a kid, had games on Newgrounds, all that kind of stuff. I decided that what I wanted to do was pick a really simple mechanic that was actually achievable. As anything I'd kind of tried to build in a solo venture in the last while, it basically started too complex and then it became even more complex as I was developing it. So these games never saw the light of day. They're 50, 60, 70% completed, at which point I say, it's actually not very fun, so that I might as well not continue on this, or I just got burnt out. I thought back to a small module I did on game theory during college when I was studying computer science. And it was based on the prisoner's dilemma, where, two people are in prison, they're being sentenced in prison. And basically, if one snitches on the other, then they get a reduced term. But if they both snitch on each other, they get the full term. If neither of them snitch, they both get, basically a medium-sized term. So the winner is, don't snitch, and you're going to get through it together. You're both going to share the punishment and share the success, etc., etc. So I decided, I want to build that, and that's a very simple mechanic. It's pretty much two buttons that I put together. I just need to put a chat window into it. So I got straight to work on that then. A simple version of it was built within about 2 or 3 weeks, the initial prototype without matchmaking and stuff. Well, it had matchmaking, but it was reliant on the fact that there were only 2 people trying to play it, both of which were myself on 2 different devices. So, it's a very, very simple core game loop from it. Once I got that kind of fleshed out, I said, okay, this is nearly ready to go public. I pretty much just need to put in proper matchmaking, and then I need to get it launched somewhere and see if I can get a bit of traffic in to play it.
So you got it launched, and when did people start noticing it? Did it just kind of build through word of mouth?
So it's been a very weird slow burn on it. It's usually with games you get your one burst when you launch, and that is it. And this game originally launched back in April of last year. We're nearly 1 year old with that game, but most people have only been playing it for about a month. That's when it kind of got a second wind, a second surge of users on it. So when it originally launched on Congregate, those guys were extremely helpful. I got in touch with them and said, look, I want to use your API. Can you basically give me access to the API keys that I need for it and any documentation. So they said, yeah, sure, let's do this. We'll take a look at it. So they took a look. They actually QA'd it for me as well. They found a bug where, they found stuff that would have been incredibly embarrassing for me to launch with. There was one bug where if two people stole, it actually, the back end had this basically chance of calculating it as a steal. It was just, or as a share. So basically the game logic was inherently broken. And they spotted that and a couple of other bugs. Said, yeah, can you fix that stuff up? So yeah, extremely helpful. And I got that stuff fixed up. I sent on another version for them to review. And then they pointed out that this game isn't going to work unless there's a couple of people playing it. I mean, this, like back then there was a much more structured kind of tier system in it. And it required an individual player to be on every individual tier, meaning that if there was less than, about 60 or 70 people playing it, you could be stuck in the queue for several minutes. So they realized that this needs a significant amount of traffic to actually have any hope of surviving. And they actually put me on the front page and said, look, we're just going to put it on here and see how it does with players. And if it maintains a decent score, then we'll keep you on there for a while.
The game is free. Congregate is a platform for free games. How does this work as a business for you?
So the version that went up on Congregate, so you have to remember that this game has been technically in development for a year, albeit the original version that launched was about 10 weeks of development in total. So the game was extremely different back then. There was just that one core game loop. You split or you steal, and that's it, you're finished. Like, there's nothing to go from there. The version that's available now has a lot more kind of game loops added into it with repeatable content, which allows people to say you can. I don't know if you've actually played it much yourself. Have you?
Yes, I have. Not a ton, but I've played 10 hours or so.
Yeah, so you've seen that, you've got a large selection of cosmetics in it. There's kind of a headquarters in it with idle logic. You can get multipliers, you can get artifacts in that multiply on top of your multipliers. There's heists in it, there's organizations. None of that was in the game at the start. So pretty much the average amount of time that somebody would spend playing it until they exhausted all possible content was about 25 minutes. And the only purchases that were available at that time was the doubler. And the only reason back then really that you would buy a doubler was solely to support the game, and that was it. There was no real incentive as somebody playing the game to get it, because all you were doing was you're basically cutting the amount of content down by, up to 1 hour down to maximum 30 minutes, if not less. So back then it might as well have been kind of donation driven. The income is non-existent, being completely open and honest on it. I think there was about $1,000 or so was brought in total over a course of about 2 months. The largest income I received was from winning Congregate's monthly competition. that was worth about $1,200.
So is this a passion project? Is this something that you're like, do you want to turn this into your primary income?
Yeah. So, you remember I was saying that, like, I started building this when pretty much I was sleeping on a couch. I was going from couch to PC to build something just to kind of get my mind kind of back into a better place, pretty much get myself kind of out of the rut that I was in. And that was pretty much it. And I had no idea that it was going to pick up any following at all. I expected maybe about 100 players, maybe 200 if I got really lucky. And on Congregate then, it took in about 30,000 players over the course of 1 month. So that was kind of a very immediate point of, I probably should have built this out a little bit better. I didn't think it would catch on the way it did. And there's a lot of things I could have put in here to actually make this more enjoyable for the people who are playing it and get them to stick around a little longer. But the reality was that I needed to kind of get back into full-time employment at that stage. And there was a lot of people still playing the game. I started developing updates for it kind of as quickly as I could to flesh all of that out. But the reality was that up until about 2 months ago, there was maybe about, I think the monthly unique user count was about 500 people per month. And a lot of people that logged in during that time logged in when nobody else was actually online, so they could not find the game. there was a small Discord community of players that kind of organized the time. They could all go online and play with each other. But that was about it. But I mean, that was kind of the project itself, and the people who played it, they kind of did help bring me out of that rut that I was in. And I wanted to kind of commit to, you're still going to get updates. I'm going to keep this game alive for you as long as you enjoy it. And eventually that came to the point of, nobody's really playing this on Congregate anymore. You've ported it to cartridge, which is standalone. Can you port it to Steam? So I figured, yeah, I can definitely port it to Steam. It'll take me about 2 or 3 months because I have, a full-time job on top of this. But I'll get it ported over. So yeah, I ported it over at Christmas time. I had, break from work. So that allowed me to get most of the work kind of finalized and tested in that time. And yeah, got it up on Steam. And I expected again, I kind of looked at Congregate, so the players that came in from that. And it kind of, the biggest immediate strike to me was that this would not have gone anywhere on Congregate if Congregate did not advertise it for me. This is going onto Steam, and there is not a hope in hell that, Valve are going to reach out and say, hey, we'll give you a burst of traffic. It's a different kind of, it's a different ballpark when you're looking at, the biggest platform on the planet. There was a couple of YouTubers, one in particular, Northern Lion. He picked up on it when it was actually in the upcoming queue on Steam. And he had a video out on launch day of him playing the game with a couple more people who found it during the actual launch day. And that brought up the traffic to levels that it crashed out my server 3 times. So I had to immediately place an order for another dedicated machine. And the entire game runs off one sole server. And it's not one sole server anymore for obvious reasons. But I had to quickly get a new dedicated machine up and start kind of working out, if this traffic continues on, I'm going to have to get, proper sharding in place on this. And there's a lot of kind of technical hurdles that I'm going to have to overcome if I want to keep this at a level where, it won't bankrupt me simply to keep the game running. But thankfully, the new server that I got it pushed onto came basically at the same time as me spending about 2 or 3 days straight optimizing the back-end code, setting up decent kind of caching systems, stuff like that. Once it did go up onto the new server, it managed to hold, I think the peak came at 1,070 concurrent players, which that level of traffic coming in at one time, that was because streamers picked up on it as well. There was XQC, Lyric, and Fortson. They all played on the same day, which sent in this massive burst of traffic. And then that fed back into the game itself, that a lot of new players arrived in from watching streamers play it. They left a review on Steam. The reviews were positive. I think at the start it was in around 91 or 92% because people loved the novelty of it. And that actually funneled it into appearing on the front page of Steam. So that wound up basically bringing in, as I said, Valve are not going to reach out and give this to me, but just basically a happenstance turn of good luck.
I mean, it sounds like that's the system that Valve set up working, right? That's how they want it to work, where like people notice it takes some time, but if it really holds up and it holds up under the scrutiny of a few early adopters, it might eventually get to the front page and boom, it worked out for you, right?
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, it's a perfectly good system. That's kind of it's odd because before that happens, I was thinking in my head, what if I end up on the front page of Steam? And I was kind of like, well, that's not going to happen, so you don't need to worry about that too much. But then as it turns out, the system that they built did work quite well. The game was very positively received. A lot of people were playing it. There was, a Discord community. We had a Discord channel that maybe had 20 or 30 active users, and I think on day one of launching on Steam there was about 1,000 or somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 people joined at once. So I do like to think that, at the start I was saying like, no, it's not going to get here and stuff like that, but then it was kind of like, it kind of deserves to be there at this stage. These people are enjoying it, and a lot of time and effort has been put into it at this stage, and considering that's kind of the thing when it comes to the reason that you would look at, say, Splitter Seal and go, you're not getting on the front page of Steam, is that it comes down to, this is just me and going from my couch to a desk, and I made this thing and I just added to it over a while. When you think of front page on Steam, you think of, AAA studios, or, you think of basically indie starlets, like say, Undertale. That's going to be on the front page of Steam because that is, literally 3 years of blood, sweat and tears gone into that thing. And I suppose at the start you often feel that you're not going to be there because you're not reaching the criteria that other developers have put into this with, millions of dollars invested or several years put into it. But when it does happen, you still get the exact same boost from it. And I guess that's kind of one of the important things kind of gleam from independent game development, in that you don't need to actually build Undertale to get onto the front page of Steam. If you build something that people will enjoy, it will be on the front page of Steam. Albeit you do need perhaps a little bit of luck in having YouTubers or streamers discover it beforehand.
Here's what you've described to me so far is a lot of what sounds like costs to you. Things that cost money, buying servers, spending your time optimizing the game. Is there anything now, since you've put all this extra work into the game, offsetting those costs for you?
Yes, there is. It's. I just kind of realized as you were saying that that's right. This podcast is based around how games make money, not about how.
if a game is costing you money, I want to talk about that too. But if there is a point where that switched from costing you money to making you some money, or things breaking even, or whatever it is, I want to hear it. Tell me about it.
Yeah, certainly. So the first year that the game is running, I can put my hands up and say, yes, I literally just funded it out of pocket. There was the small bit of money at the start, which covered for, a couple of months of server costs and stuff like that. But, when you bring in everything else on top of it, like, even paying for my Unity license, paying for, my Photoshop licenses, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, all those small things do add up. It's not just a server that costs you money. And then there's kind of the cost of your own time needs to be kind of counted into it as well.
Yes.
If I was working, full time for those 10 weeks in a minimum wage job, I would have made much more money. That's kind of the given of it.
Mm-hmm.
That, if you are looking to make a quick buck, then no, indie game development is probably not for you at all. Particularly if you're running with a model that doesn't really reward high spend. It rewards a high amount of playtime more than anything else.
Right.
Which again, that kind of comes down to the whole passion project side of the deal. But so now that it has launched on Steam, in the first 2 or 3 days, it covered for about a year and a half worth of server costs, and it continued making a small income beyond that point. Then it's not enough for me to go full time off. It certainly wouldn't be. It might be if I wasn't living in the most expensive city in Europe. But like the income it's making right now, if I wasn't living in Dublin, it's possible I would be able to go full time on it. And the second kind of side to all that is that I really enjoy my day job, and that's kind of it. That's
right.
It's like there is a lot of pull in that, I would love to be working on games full time, but the reality is that this kind of set in very clearly to me, like from the start, that, if I love my job, I'm not going to run away from it. And secondly, on top of that, and I think the whole world would have figured this out in the last month, that if you're working for a company and you're very fortunate, as I am, to be with one of the companies that are really looking after the staff during the virus outbreak, making sure we're safe, making sure we're working from home, and making sure we have everything we need, that's there's a lot of loyalty that kind of comes with that as well.
So let's talk about the game itself a little bit. The game has its own sort of in-game economy where people have to make decisions about what they want to risk, what they think is worth it. How did you go about designing the way that economy works?
Poorly. to be honest, a lot of it, when it was originally designed, the only items that were available in it were cosmetics, and there was no reward back then from having a cosmetic. So the reality was that the only design I had to put into it was kind of figuring out how long will it take you to get to this level to exhaust content. And the reality was I completely underestimated it. Because any test groups that I ran the game with, and these were, a lot of them were people that I knew, and they all stole from each other. They could never get past, tier 2 or tier 3. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. People aren't that nice. So I assumed that most people playing it would be, I assumed that the steal rate would be at 70 or 80%.
Sure.
And that this game is probably going to frustrate a lot of people. It's why I spent a lot of time kind of sitting there and saying that, this is, that this is not going to be received very well when it goes up online, because this game is dependent on people being nice to each other, and they're probably not going to do that. That was pretty much what I designed the original economy around, to make it possible to actually get these unlockable cosmetics while people are not being very nice. And then it turns out that about 90% of people actually share the pot every time.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, what I had designed out to be, 8 or 9 hours worth of content boiled down to, 1 hour at the absolute maximum. And they had unlocked every cosmetic, and that was it. So,
why do you think so many people share? What is it? Is the social pressure? Did you just put too much reward into sharing?
Back then, no, and the share rate was actually much higher back then. Nowadays, it hovers in between around 80 and 85%, and on a bad day, it might go down to 75%. So back then, no, there was no incentive whatsoever to share. Nowadays, you can buff your ability to share, in that it's nearly worth more to share than to actually steal at any one time. So yeah, back then, if you weren't stealing, you were losing money, and that was it. I mean, there wasn't even karma or warnings for recently stolen back then. It was just straight in, and you could steal, and there's no punishment whatsoever. So it's odd that, like, back then, when it was brand new and fresh, people kind of figured out amongst themselves that these people will remember me if I keep stealing. And so I literally can't steal, because they will remember me and they'll steal from me, and then we're both going to get stuck. So a lot of it comes down to, the game theory still holds true, in that it is more kind of what's the word for it? It's more sustainable in the long run to share, because if you screw somebody over, you have a very good chance of running into them again. So people tend to share in that case, and they reserve stealing for people that they know have stolen from them before. Or I suppose, to kind of skip forward to the version of the game that we have nowadays, stealing comes down to, if you're wearing the wrong cosmetic, if you're in the wrong organization, or there's more incentive to steal now than there was before, because as you can buff, the ability to split cash, you can also buff your ability to steal cash. And I've kept the economy running in such a way that stealing will always be worth more if that's what you're investing into. The game pretty much pushes you in the direction of stealing, and there's an odd balance that kind of has to be struck in that. I suppose moving away from the original version of the game and the version that we have now, and designing the economy for that and the mechanics around it, if you are splitting 100% of the time, it is an awful game. If you're being stolen from more than about 70% of the time, or sorry, if you're being split with less than 70% of the time, or being stolen from 30% of the time, it is also an awful game. That is the point where the game stops in either direction. It's about, if you don't keep it in about 75 to 95% ranges of splitting, then it's the game becomes not fun anymore. If there's no fear of being stolen from, then you have no enjoyment to gain from it, because you have risked absolutely nothing. If you're getting stolen from every time, then you don't have any attachment to what you're actually playing with. You will steal as well, and you will feed into this, basically, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that if somebody steals from you and you feel crap about it, you're going to start stealing, and then that's going to happen to the next person, and it's just going to feed into itself. The feedback loop continues on, and the game breaks down. And that's kind of one of the most interesting things about it, in that I have tried to push things in a direction before, and I've buffed certain things, I've nerfed other things to kind of try and get people to stay within that range. And the reality is, as I found, I have extremely little power over any of this stuff.
Yeah, it's just all like humans being humans, right? Like they're just going to kind of do what they're going to do.
Yeah, like I can try and push the needle in one direction, but the reality is most people don't care. Say if I say, right, okay, if split bonuses in this building are up by like 10%, so it is, it's really beneficial for you all to start splitting right now. About 90% of people won't even read it. They won't even know that exists on there. And the 10% of people that do read it will say, well, no, I don't want to do that. And then that's it. The needle can only kind of be, I can kind of react to things, but I can't control what's actually happening in it. The fact that the game is where it is right now, and that it's managed to sustain itself in that state, it's why I say that, it's planned poorly by myself, because I cannot plan for it. The players are the only ones that get to decide how that stuff works.
And so, yeah, like it does seem like there's a lot of player driven culture in the game where people in like there's a global chat where people come and when they get stolen from they they say your name like, oh, you that this person stole from me, like, and other people see it and stuff like that, and it just seems like people have an idea of the way the game should work, and it just seems it's so interesting. How have you responded to that? What does that cause you to put into the game or implement that you wouldn't have otherwise?
Yeah, so a lot of that stuff, again, it's kind of a lot of it is kind of respecting how the players actually envision the game being themselves. So that whole thing of like shouting somebody's name out if they steal from you, that has been around since before global chat was in the game. Like, it used to be on Congregate that people would go on to the Congregate chat room, which is external from the game, and they would use that then to call out, thieves and stuff like that. So when it first happened, I kind of said, well, that's kind of ruining the game. And I was kind of thinking, like, how can I stop that? And then I realized, well, I can't. There is no way to stop that. I mean, if I try to block it from here, then they will just go somewhere else and they'll do it there. It's like if you made an online game like Battlefield and you said like, oh, for realism, you're not allowed to use your headsets. You all have to take them off. We're disabling your microphone. They'll use Discord. They're going to do it either way. And the important thing to kind of take from that is that you need to react to how players actually are using the in-game mechanics, even if they're using it not as intended. That a lot of the time they're doing it because it's what's fun. And in this case, that's what some players find fun. They have a tight-knit community together and they want to all split with each other and make cash. And then, they basically use these mechanics to call people out to say like, yeah, this guy is, stealing from us. And oftentimes, people get a kick from that. They see their name going into the thieves list, and that's fun for them. And that's pretty much it. So yeah, stuff like that. The global chat was actually me kind of embracing that. So when I was launching on Steam and cartridge, I realized that this is where a lot of the players are having the fun. They're having it all in the Congregate chat room. But if I launch on Steam, I can't tell them, oh, also open your browser and put that here. And yeah, you can chat. It doesn't work. So I had to build the global chat system purely on that I wanted to allow people to continue to be able to call out thieves. And that's pretty much it. Like, and now, so when we launched originally on Steam, because of the server load issues, I actually switched off the chat server because that was just crashing nonstop. And people have commented that the meta has been drastically different for when that chat is on and for when that chat is off. And a lot of people have requested, turn it back off. It's more fun when it's off. And the majority of people that have asked about it have said, no, we need that to be on. That's, it's where we have our community. So don't disable it, you'll kill the game. And so new mechanics that I've kind of looked into from that is that we don't need to kill it altogether, but we could have events. We could have 1 hour every second or third night where the chat is disabled, all the names are made anonymous, and you can play the game as it kind of was originally intended. You have no information on each other. Stuff like that.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Like, how do you decide like what information to give to players? Like you brand people if they stole. Like that goes along with them on their current run. How do you decide what information to provide to the opposing player?
So when it shows up that somebody has stolen, one of the reasons that went in there is because they were getting called out, and it was kind of at the start of it was nearly a remnant of me trying to get rid of the call outs because it often led to flaming in the chat room and stuff like that. Yeah. So I said, okay, I tell you what, if you don't need to put it in the chat room and this is just publicly announced and it's going to happen, then it's not so bad. Now, the call out still happened in chat, but it was often responded to with, well, yeah, I have big red letters over my face. I mean, there's no, I don't need to deny this. So yeah, that was one of the bits of information that went in purely as nearly to kind of avoid a bad mechanic that was leading to player toxicity. And I mean, the call out still happened, but the toxicity did drop considerably from it. Stuff like the karma value in there as well. That was, again, a lot of that came back to the, this player is a known thief and I'm keeping my black book here and you're in it. It's like, okay, well, the black book can be public. So made the karma system. The karma is now shared at the start of games. It was gamified a little bit with, custom titles that appear for you, stuff like that. That was pretty much expanding on what the players had already designed as a black book. They had a Google Sheets document. They were keeping all these names in, saying, how many times they stole and stuff like this. It's like, okay, well, if you're going to continue doing that, we might as well make it an actual mechanic. And that was pretty much where karma came from. And I think the nice thing about karma was that it did cut down on, like, some people do still keep their little black book when they're playing. That's that's all well and good. But a lot, like, I mean, we don't have such kind of organized groups for it now because you don't need to. There's a karma value that shows up, and you can literally take one look at that and say if they're stealing a lot or if they're sharing a lot. So, or splitting a lot, as the name goes. But so with stuff like that, again, I always have a fear when implementing something like that could, well, at least in the early days, that could tip the balance. And I found that no, people have just adapted to it. People wear their zero karma like a badge of honor, saying, I've stolen every game. What of it? It's like, yeah, respect.
Owen, I want to thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. It was a really great conversation. Do you want to tell people where they can find you, find the game, anything like that?
Yeah, so I'm available on Twitter on the username Rootpew, and if you pop onto Steam and search for Split or Steal, you will find myself and all the madmen that want to rob you in the world. So please do check us out.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Everybody, thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another new episode. Until then, thank you so much. We'll see you then. Goodbye.